Welcome! In this video we will put some finishing touches to the custom color picker control created in the last video with the PowerBasic Windows Compiler. This was our custom color picker at the end of the last video, allowing us to click on a custom button, select a color and have that color stored for later use. However, what we're going to do today is we're going to enhance this slightly. What I want to do is to be able to put some text into a text control, then click the color button, select a color and have that color applied immediately to the text in the text control. Whilst currently we have no way of setting the background color. So what I'd like to have is two buttons, one to set the foreground color and one to set the background color. So how are we going to do that? Well, first thing to do is to look at our common Windows control. If we're going to have two buttons, we'll have to differentiate between them. So we will have to have two icons. One for the foreground color, which is the one on screen at the moment, and one for the background color. So now we have two icons. In addition, as each control has 8 slots where you can store the long integers on, we're only using one of them at the moment. We're going to expand that so we can actually keep track of what we're going to be doing easier. So I've created 3 more constants for the 3 other slots. In our first slot we're still going to store the color picked by the user. In our second slot we're going to store the pointer to the target control for positioning, so we can position our button to the right of the target. In our third slot we're going to be storing the constant for a color zone. In other words, we're going to be changing the foreground or the background colors. And in our fourth slot we're going to be storing the handle to the target control which we wish to paint in color. So in order to determine whether we're doing a foreground or a background color, we're going to be adding 2 more constants, set as 1 and 2, the first one being for the foreground color and the second one being for the background color. Because we're going to be handling more information going to the custom control, we'll need to have basically more parameters. So rather than create more parameters, what I thought we'll do is we will create a user-defined type into which we can actually put information. We were passing things like the dialog handle, so we'll store this in a control color parameters user-defined type. We will store the handle of the control to which we want to place our control beside, the handle of the color picker control, the handle of the control we wish to paint, and a setting which is going to be one of these 2 constants to say is it going to be foreground or background. So having set all that up, let's go back to our application and have a look at where we actually set up and place the color control on the screen. Now, at the moment we use this function to place the color picker control on screen. Now we're still going to use this function, but we're going to call it slightly differently. What we're going to do is we're going to set up our user-defined type using the user-defined type we specified earlier. And we're going to populate the values going into this user-defined type so we can pass as a parameter to our place color picker function. So to save a bit of typing, we're going to use the prefix command. The prefix command, as you remember from our previous videos, prefixes the following lines with what you have in the quotes. It does save a bit of typing, but it does have the bonus and makes your code a little easier to read. So first of all, we will put into the root control handle the handle of the object beside which we want to put our new color picker. And then our painting handle will be the pointer to the object we wish to paint, which in this case is the same object. Our control handle is the handle of the object which is going to be our color picker control. Now I'm changing this slightly from what we had before. At the beginning of our application where we set up these values, that is what we set up. Now I'm changing this one to make it more obvious the fact it's the foreground color picker, and there's going to be another color picker control which will be background. So effectively we'll have two buttons on the screen. And the final element of this user-defined type will be the color zone to determine whether it's foreground or background. And we'll be using our new constant. So having done all that, we have to call the place color picker, but rather than all the parameters we were using previously, we're going to replace this with just the user-defined type. So since we've changed the parameters going into this function, obviously we're going to have to change the function. So rather than having three parameters in here, we'll have a single parameter. Now, since we're passing this as a user-defined type, what we'll want to do to save a bit of typing and make our code nice and readable, we're going to use a new local variable, and this is going to be a pointer. And we're going to populate that using the var pointer command. And we'll point to what we've been passed in. So having picked that up, it means we can actually set things much easier. Now before we actually start to position it or work things out on screen, there's a couple of things we want to check. Because this same function is going to be used for both the foreground and the background controls, we need to work out which one we're actually doing. So we'll need another variable to work out which icon to use, and we'll have to test, and this is where our pointer comes in handy. It's pointing towards the variable we basically passed in, and if that equals the constant we've defined, so if it is foreground, so this lets us determine whether it's a foreground or background icon. Now down here, which we had hard-coded in the command which placed the image button on the screen, we can then substitute that variable for our previous hard coding. Just slot it in like so. So now where we would have got the handle, we can now point this towards our user-defined type. And our target is the root control handle. There we go. So that's picking up the size and location of the control handle we wish to place something beside. And then once we've actually positioned the control on screen, what we'll want to do is to store some information. And again, we're going to use the prefix command. So every line following this one will have this set as a prefix to the line, and that's done at compile time. So what we plan to do is to store information in our target control in the 3 slots we're actually interested in populating. And finally storing the handle of the control that's actually going to be painted. And the final information we wish to store is the foreground and background colours in the control to be painted. And again, prefix will be used. One of the issues I came across actually designing these controls was that while there are perfectly good commands to set a colour on a control, there don't seem to be any commands to read a colour of a control. Probably the designers of the application and Windows operating system assumed that since you set the colour of a control, then it's up to you to keep track of it rather than Windows itself. There may well be some Windows API call I haven't come across yet that actually lets me do that. But what we're doing here is we're storing the initial settings of the control so that the foreground colour is black and the background colour is white. And we'll be using this storage location later on to update every time the colour changes, so we've always got a place to actually get the information easily. And we're using 2 of the inbuilt constants for black and white. So this last part of the command actually will store the default values, which are our initial values, which the user can then update. So if the user doesn't actually change any of the values, we will have them preset. So we'll just save that, and we'll do a quick compile just to make sure we've not missed anything. And yes, what's it having an issue with? That's because I spent colour wrong. That'll help. Let's try that. Right, yes. Now, for the moment I'm going to comment out the build chart functionality because we're not going to be using that anymore. Not at this point. And helps if we spell resource correctly. Right, okay, we just have to change that to use the pointer. And we're just about there, I think. Nope, not quite. Ah, yes, yes. The call control needs to change. Right, let's check to see if we've got everything in place. Ah, yes, another misspelling. Right, okay. Now, if we run this program now, it runs quite nicely. And pick our colour. And it doesn't change. Now, because we've actually changed the constants we're using and changed the way we actually call the custom control, we'll need to handle this within our callback function, the event handler itself. So we go to the event handler and have a look when the button's actually clicked. Now at the moment in here it's very straightforward. This is going to become a little more complicated, but not too much so. We have three variables set up at the top, or two variables in a user-defined type. We're going to add to that slightly and add on some more, which we will use basically to pick up the things like the colour zone, the painting handle, the foreground colour and the background colour. So when the button actually gets clicked, what we do at the moment is we display the colour picker. Now that bit's not actually changing. What is going to be changing is when we actually save the colour. Now we're still setting the colour picked to be the colour the user actually picked. And what we need to do now is set the target control. So what we're doing then, we're actually interrogating the stored location, the paint handle slot, to find out if there's a value in there. Now there should be a value in there. Now we need to determine are we changing the foreground or the background colour. So we're picking up the colour zone, be it foreground or background. And then having got those two bits of information, we're now then going to test the value of the painting handle to make sure we have actually got a control we can do something with. So if the paint handle variable is actually greater than 0, we have actually defined a target to be painted. So if it's a foreground colour we're actually wanting to paint, we need to find out what the current background colour is. So this will let us interrogate the control to find out what the current background colour is. And then, since we know what the long colour is, since we've got that up here, and we know what the background colour is because we pulled it back from its stored location, we can then use the control set colour command to set both the foreground and the background colours at the same time. Now, if that's not the case, then that handles foreground, and we now need to handle the background. It's much the same kind of logic. And one thing I forgot to do up here is we need to store the colour that the user actually picked. So we'll need to do a control set user. So we actually store the foreground colour for the next time round, so we'll remember it. So there are three steps: one to get the current background colour, one to set the colour of the target, the painting handle, and one to set the user slot for that control to what the colour the user actually picked. So we're doing the same thing for the background one, with our variables will be changing slightly. So the first thing to do is to set the foreground colour. So we can actually read what the current value of the foreground colour is. And then the second one is to set the exactly the same to set the foreground colour and the background colour. So in this case we're setting the colour in there, and the background colour goes to the colour the user picked, and then the final stage is to store the background color, which the user has actually picked, to the color they picked. And after we've done all that, we want to redraw the control to make sure it displays the color we've actually selected. Right, okay. So we'll save that and do a quick compile. Now I've missed something on this. Yep, misspelling. What would we do without syntax checkers? Yes, it's control redraw. I'm missing a comma in there. And I think we're in business. Yes, we're working. Right, okay. Now, if we do that quite nicely now, put our text in, click on our button to set the foreground colour. Let's pick red, and it's displaying quite happily in red. Now what we need is a second button, one to handle background colours. Now that one, considering all the work we put in, should be remarkably easy to do. What we've done here is we've basically placed a control on screen whose job it is to do the foreground colours. What we want now is one to do the background colours. So what we'll do is we will copy all of the code we did for the previous button, and we'll make a few small adjustments. Now the root control handle, which we had set to the text box, if we did that, then this new button would overwrite the existing color picker button, so we want it to be further to the right. So what we want to do is we want to give it the handle of the first color button, so it will appear to the right of that one. We're still planning on repainting the same text control. We want the handle to be a new handle, which we'll need to create in a moment. This is the handle for our color picker button, and the color zone this is going to be handling is background color. So if we go up to the top of our application where our numbers are actually set up, and in here we created a second one already. This is a constant for a new button. So we have a look at that now. And having set these variables up, we're calling the same function with the same parameter, which has been handled by the same event handler. So if we try running the application now, it now has two buttons. Now I've picked the icons slightly differently to try and illustrate one's foreground and one's background, but feel free to change the icons. If we put some text in here now, and we use the foreground button to change the foreground, and we'll change that to, say for example, red, and OK it. If we now click the background button, we can pick a background colour, and when we click OK on that, the background text is actually changed. All good. So we can then click on the foreground one again, and we can change the colour to a different foreground colour, and it is remembering the background quite happily. So our two paired colour picker controls are now working together, using basically the same code to place the control on screen, the same event handler behind the scenes, and tied to the same target control. So This completes today's work. Thank you for watching.